Did any of the following actually happen as described in these scary stories? Dogman Rampage at the traveling carnival. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a story for you about a dogman from when I was in my early 20s. I'm older than the current president, so unless you're one of those who think that math is racist, you've already figured out that my story took place in the 20th century. It was the early 70s, specifically, in some backwoods area of western Pennsylvania. When the dogman saw the traveling carnival I was working with, he flew into a rage, and I swear I saw my young life flash in front of my eyes, just like in the movies. This was a bipedal kind of dogman, not the four-legged kind they say comes from Michigan. It walked upright, and if not for the canine hind legs, I would have thought it was a tall acrobat wearing animal skins. I got close enough to smell his dog breath, and I'll tell you every detail I can still remember. To be honest, it's easier to remember the 70s these days than it is for me to remember my 70s, so let's get on with my anecdote. First of all, I want to say that I've been blessed to always get to do what I wanted to do in life and make a living off of it. I'm a former carny. I'm a former used car salesman. And for the last 27 and a half years, I've been a local politician here in a state you couldn't pay me to name. If you think there's any difference at all between being a carny, a used car salesman, or a politician, I'm here to disabuse you of that notion. Most of my peers in politics got into it through being a lawyer first. Take it from me, there's no difference between being a lawyer and being a carny. All of these are the same job with different names. But the purest form the avocation can take, in my opinion, is to be a carnival worker. It's your job to look people in the eye and encourage them to fork over money to play games of chance that are rigged so that they literally can never be won. It's your job to lie while smiling, then steal. If you can't get good at being a carny, then you'll never make it in politics. I don't want to act like I was a carny for very long, not even a year, but I learned all the keys to survival that I still use to this day. What are they? Do you think I would tell a rube like you? Go find out for yourself the hard way. My favorite guy in our show was the sideshow barker, who I will call Bilgewater. Old Bilgewater was the most talented BS artist that I ever witnessed in person. And I've been to Congress in D.C., okay? He could create pictures in your mind with words that would make you gladly hand over your hard-earned cash to see what he was selling. Then, once you got inside, you had to admit that Bilgewater hadn't exactly lied to you, but he sure hadn't told you the truth either. It was close enough that nobody was gonna sue, and almost nobody ever demanded their money back. The freak show they had back then was a good one for the time. I'd heard stories about how much greater it had been in the past, before they started creating laws limiting how far out the exhibits could legally go, and how much they were allowed to quote-unquote exploit the deformed. Heck, exploit means to turn a profit. If exploiting people became illegal, then it would be against the law to hold down an honest job. I was the first to see the dogman or werewolf or whatever it was that came into our carnival that night. At least, I was the first to do anything about it. I didn't recognize the creature, but it sure looked like it might have been one of Bilgewater's sideshow acts that escaped. And if it wasn't, then he might want to grab a few men and go try to capture it for that purpose. I had only gotten a glance at the creature or freak or God knows what it was, but I instinctively knew it would make for a great exhibit. Bilgewater got me and 2 more men to go back with him to where I saw the creature. But by the time we got there, the dogman had got completely mental and was ripping tents down. I saw a popcorn concession stand on fire. It looked like that animal man was about to cause the end of the carnival for good. I'm going to try to remember exactly what this thing looked like, as I never saw anything like it before or since. It did have a head like a wolf for the most part. The neck seemed extremely long, though. It could hold its neck up and see further, or it could bend its neck down in front so that the head would be lowered down to your eye level without the beast man having to bend at the shoulder or at the waist. He must have been 6 feet tall at the shoulder, and I really can't even guess how much taller he was when he held his head up in the air. He was remarkably athletic and strong, leaping up and down and all over the place. It was like he was in several places at once, and his arm strength when he tore things down was breathtaking. I had lived in that circus for months by then, and I knew how tough the ropes and the canvas were. This man thing was slicing rope with his claws, and he would start pulling a tent down with one sharp grab. It was a display of superhuman strength that I hadn't even seen in the movies at that point. They didn't have special effects back then that could match up with what I saw that Dogman do on that night. Bilgewater told us to grab him and subdue him, but then the Dogman charged at us, getting right in my face, and as you would expect, the three of us ran away like cowards. We were like children next to that Dogman, and he had teeth and claws on top of his height advantage. There was no way for us to get close enough to grab him without getting ourselves torn up in the process. There was a lasso act traveling with us, and they all got ropes around the creature. Rather than using the ropes to subdue him, though, the creature used the ropes to fling his captors around for a while until he freed himself and charged off outside of the fair into the woods he had come from. It was all we could do to put out the fires and block off the damaged area from paying customers. We didn't have the opportunity to follow the beast into the woods. The show kept on going that night. We only had to close down a few things. I know a man was hired after that to patrol the perimeter of our shows looking for Dogman or anything else we didn't want to get in. It sounds funny to think that one man was the answer to that problem, but he was armed, and he was effective. Bilgewater and some of the others in charge had a theory. They felt that because the woodlands were getting cut down to put in place those cookie-cutter communities for suburban workers to live in, the Dogman and Sasquatch in places like western Pennsylvania, and then all through the Midwest, were finding their habitats diminishing. My coworkers felt that these kinds of cryptid freakouts were going to probably become more common. I have no idea if they actually did. When someone brought up the idea of capturing one of these cryptids for exhibition, those of us who had actually been charged at by the Dogman laughed out loud. Even if we could capture that thing, how long could we hold him? And from what I've heard, Bigfoot is even bigger than what tried to burn our carnival down. I'd seen my coworkers deal with criminals from stick-up men to local sheriffs demanding their share of the take, and I never saw any of them get nervous or break a sweat. Except for that night, when that dog-headed hairy man got up in our faces. That ugly monster still visits me in my dreams on nights when I've had too much Mexican food. Now there was a name that the carnies gave to the Dogman that I don't remember all these years later. I believe it was something in French, most likely something idiomatic. It's possible it might not translate directly into English, even if I could remember what it was. It might only be a name that carnies would know. I mean, when Bilgewater saw the creature, he was surprised at the size of it, but not the appearance of it. He seemed to know that these dog-headed things existed in the woods of North America, although I don't know if he had actually ever seen one before. I got the impression that there was a lot more to that story than I was privy to, but I knew better than to ask about it. There are some things you're told up front when you're starting out in a carnival or circus kind of life, but most of the information is earned through years of experience and people learning whether or not they can trust you. If I wanted to learn what they knew about Dogman or Bigfoot, I was going to have to put in another 20 years hard labor to get there. That wasn't for me, though. I saw a commercial on TV for a certain used car salesman in a certain part of a certain United States, and I knew what the next phase of my life was going to be. Sure, the carnival is exciting and it's kind of like show business, but it wasn't going to get me on TV. The way I put it when I quit to go work for that dealership was, you guys watch car dealership commercials when you pass through this town, but we used car dealers won't ever turn on the TV set and see any of you. I was ready to move up in the world of BS artistry. I was getting ready to bamboozle the entire tri-state region. Some great carnival performers can develop a cult following that will travel to see them. On the other hand, I used the fame of my used car dealership's TV commercials to launch a career in the greatest racket there will ever be. And that, of course, is being granted the honor of serving you fine people as your honestly and duly elected representative. In my life, pretty much all the questions have been answered. I picked up every rock and observed all the creepy bugs squirming underneath. I didn't only find out how sausage was made, I took payoffs to let them cut corners with the sausage. I know how things really happen, and I have no illusions about how the world works. But the one thing that never got explained to me, the one question that nobody ever answered is, what the heck was that dogman that freaked out in that carnival I worked at in the early 1970s? How can one of that species not have been captured and cataloged by science yet? It's been 50 years since this story happened. Think how far we've advanced technologically in that time, yet nobody has produced a zoo exhibit or a museum exhibit to prove that this creature lives now, or indeed ever lived, throughout history or prehistory. The carnival in this story went out of business years ago, the rides and the acts all dispersing to other shows or leaving the field entirely. There's nobody still alive that I could ask, not that they would be likely to tell me much of anything anyway. I wish I could talk to old Bilgewater one last time. I wish I could get the lowdown from him. What exactly was that long-necked, dog-headed man creature? Was it a werewolf? Why did it freak out and go on a rampage as though our mere presence were an outrage in its eyes? Why did it seem to hate human beings and despise our presence in that Pennsylvania valley on that warm summer night? I guess you might say that for me, there really is only one mystery left unsolved. It's the last thing standing between me and absolute cynicism about everything. And yet, it weighs less than air itself, because it's only my collection of memories about the Dogman Rampage at the Traveling Carnival. Don't go anywhere, we've got another story about Dogman spoiling the fun of evening revelers. But first, please allow me to take a moment to thank tonight's executive producer, Michael A. Bell. Michael A. Bell, we think he's swell, knocking out rhymes like Ding Dong Dell. Please join us in thanking our executive producer, Michael A. Bell, for making this episode possible. In return, we send him links to see our secret uncensored Sunday night stories. And you can see them too. Just join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com or click the join link below this or any of our videos. The channel memberships can go as low as 99 cents, and everybody gets to see the Sunday secret episodes available nowhere else. And speaking about features available nowhere else, there was a time in America when a group of people could make a movie and then travel around, showing it at drive-ins around whatever state they lived in. That meant that some films would only play down south, and other films would only play out west. You could go to the drive-in and see something that might never be seen anyplace else ever again. It added an extra excitement to the evening's entertainment, but not as much as was added by the Drive-In Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I once saw a dogman running around like a lunatic between cars parked at a drive-in, and I laughed my butt off. Don't get me wrong, I didn't understand that it was a real monster at first. Let me tell you the story. This was way back in the early 70s or possibly the late 60s. I was a young punk before that term was a compliment, and my dad would let me borrow his Chevy Malibu to take my girlfriend, we'll call Groovina, to the drive-in. Groovina was groovy, man, or at least she had me convinced that she was. I was crazy about tripped-out girls and hippie girls back then. I didn't care for women who had jobs or spoke normal English. I liked the ones who grew medicinal herbs in their window boxes and called themselves healers. I also liked painters, poets, and all that jazz. It was the age of liberation, and I was all about liberation. Groovina was the grooviest girl of all, and she would bop me on the noggin if she were still alive and heard me calling her Groovina. In fact, she might come back and do it to me anyway. She was kind of a badass. So I was there with the goddess of groovy, and we were attending a drive-in showing of a werewolf movie that I've never again seen since. I don't know if it ever got a major release, so it might not even be listed anyplace online. On the other hand, it might have just been a dubbed foreign werewolf flick that I'm misremembering. Either way, it was an old-school type of werewolf story. The cursed man changes into the wolf man at the full moon. He wears his clothes, and you only see his hands and face change into the monster, which was in the style of the universal Wolfman. Again, my memories might be conflated with other drive-in pictures of that era, as I was not very concerned with the entertainment going on outside the vehicle. The groove goddess was providing me with more than enough stimulation right there in the seat next to me. So, she and I paid attention, to each other, sort of listening to the movie more than watching it. At some point, someone bumped into the car as they ran past, and we both laughed. But soon, more and more people were bumping into us, and so I lifted my head up and took the trouble of looking outside to see what the situation was. There was a guy running around out there who seemed to be wearing a dog costume. At least that's what I thought at first. I laughed and I told my girlfriend, "Hey, get up and take a look at this." I just saw all these people getting scared when they saw the dog guy coming, and then they would slip and slide to get away from him like in a comedy movie. It was better than the movie on screen, to be honest. We were watching a werewolf flick after all, so I thought that the people being chased were actors and that the werewolf was a guy in a suit. In reality, though, those people running in fear were other patrons of the drive-in like myself and Groovina. I shouldn't assume you understand what I'm talking about. I'd better give you younger folks some background. See, back then, sometimes the movies would come with a weird sort of live show. The people who made the film would travel with it, or else maybe the producer would hire some locals and put masks on them. And at a certain point in the show, the characters would run out between the cars going, "Rawr!" and looking in the car windows, trying to scare the kids. I remember seeing some no-budget movie about a gorilla, and then the gorilla suit from on screen was suddenly running around between the cars. It was a different time. If you ask me, it was a whole lot more fun back then. Oh, please don't cancel me for saying that. We thought the dog guy was a dude in a costume. We thought it was part of the show. But when he chased a girl from the concession stand back to her car, causing her to trip and spill her soda, we all started to sense that something was wrong. That seemed kind of aggressive to me, more aggressive than I would have expected from a hired actor. I turned on my headlights and I lit the guy up bright. He wasn't wearing any clothing. The werewolf in the movie wasn't naked, so why was this guy? This thing's eyes reflected back my headlights so brightly, they looked like his own headlights. He had tall, pointed wolf ears and huge dog fangs. The way he was panting and the way his tongue moved, I could tell that was no mask. And that's when Groovina pointed out that she could tell that this was a male werewolf. In other words, There wasn't any kind of costume. His maleness was on full display for one and all to marvel at. This was an upright canine, I'll just say that. We and everyone else in the place began to evacuate without anyone having to suggest it to us. The next day, we scoured the newspaper, but there wasn't a single article or mention about the incident. So I guess the drive-in did a good job covering it up. I know that Groovina and I neglected to tell our parents or guardians, and we were right back at that drive-in the next weekend, or possibly even sooner. So it's not like we got scared off for more than 1 or 2 nights by the drive-in Dogman.
Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it. You can become a channel member by clicking the join link below. Then you can check our community page to find the links to 10 hours or more of secret, uncensored Dogman stories too wild to be told on this channel. Your other option is to join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. That's Peter's homemade club, where he will personally email you the links as well as occasional secret club messages. You may also be included as an executive producer in a future episode. You have a scary experience you want to tell us about? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com, or else call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LESS-SCARY. The machine cuts off every few minutes, so if you have a long story, please keep calling back and we'll piece it together later on. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.